That's what God tells Ezekiel over and over again. What else would you add to that?
Well, I think the big problem here in this whole issue of replacement theology is a lack of a consistent literal method of interpretation. You go back to many of the prophets, and they'll take Israel to mean Israel and Judah to mean Judah when all the judgment's taking place. But then when you get to the end of almost all of the minor prophets, there's a great promise of a future for Israel, of a glorious future that I believe are promises of the ultimate messianic kingdom to give them hope. Well, then they change the meaning there, and Israel no longer means Israel. Judah doesn't mean Judah. They transfer all of that to the church. And so it's what someone has described as the worst case of identity theft in history, where the identity of Israel here has been stolen. And so it's a lack of a consistent literal method of interpretation. Also, there's a reading of the New Testament back into the Old Testament that changes the meaning of the Old Testament. And that's a very big problem. The New Testament can amplify, can add to the meaning of the Old Testament, but it can't change the meaning of it.
You have a great illustration of a professor, a well-known professor, who was espousing this view, and you asked him a question from Acts 1. Tell us about that.
There was a wonderful, well-known, godly Bible teacher in Oklahoma City where I live, and he was teaching there, and he said, the kingdom will never be restored to Israel, but that Israel will be restored to the kingdom. In other words, Israel will come into the kingdom, which is the church, but the kingdom will never be restored to Israel. Now, I went up after he was speaking and asked him about Acts chapter 1. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus has been resurrected from the dead, and during that 40 days before he ascended to heaven, said he was teaching his disciples about the kingdom of God. And near the end of that time, the disciples asked Jesus, is it at this time you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Now that would have been the perfect time if there was no future kingdom for Israel, for Jesus to say, look, you guys have gotten it all wrong. There isn't going to be a future kingdom for Israel. The church has replaced the promises to Israel. But all Jesus said in response to that is, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has fixed by His own authority. You go and be my witnesses. So I think that passage, Jesus failing to correct what they said, meant that Jesus agreed with what they said, and that is someday the kingdom will be restored to Israel, that there is a future for national Israel and for the Jewish people.